Welcome back to the show. Briefly, I want to thank John Tendy, who happens to be the owner of Shorts, and I suggested Shorts have a long talk with his clergyman. Everything will be fine. Coming up in the next half hour, we're going to have a report from George Miller's room. Ray Geiger of the Farmer's Almanac will be joining us, but now it's time to introduce a new series on this television extravaganza. You know, we believe that there are many people out there who are of an age where they would like to go out on dates, but perhaps just don't know exactly the proper way to go about it. So, therefore, at this time, we would like to introduce to you Do's and Don'ts with Frank and Fred, how to behave on a date. All right, let's see how interesting this gets. Fred, shown here, calls Shelley up and asks if she's busy on Friday night. I think that's, of course, the proper way to do it. Frank dials a number at random and claims to be Robbie Benson. Fred brings his date a long-stemmed rose. Very thoughtful. Frank brings a moist shoe tree. Moist shoe tree. Fred, on meeting his date's parents, says, "My, what a beautiful home." Fred is pretty much Eddie Haskell. Frank says, "Hey, nice watch. Let's take it downtown and sell it." Leaving with his date, Fred says, "Don't worry, sir. I'll have Shelley home by 10 p.m. Frank draws Shelley's father aside and whispers, "Hey, why don't we ditch these 2 lawn tractors and find us a couple of skirts?" Over dinner, Fred tells an anecdote about his grandfather. Can't be done without scratching your chin either, as you'll notice from the photo there. See, you just can't do it without touching your chin. Frank doesn't know any anecdotes. Instead, he counts out loud to 600. A moist shoe tree. After dinner, Fred says, "Let's attend a fine drive-in film. I'd be honored to pay your way." Frank puts his date in the trunk so he won't have to pay. After the movie, Fred and his date discuss the film together. What a weasel. Frank decided at the last moment not to go to the movie, and he drives to Milwaukee to visit his half-brother. Fred's date ends with a happy surprise when Shelley says, "I've had a wonderful time. May I see you again?" Cute. Frank's date ends with a surprise for Robbie Benson when the California Highway Patrol say, "Better put your clothes on, son. We're going downtown." Frank and Fred. Welcome back to the show. Coming up in this half hour, Bud Greenspan, sports producer, and also comedian Tom Dreesen. Right now, however, it's very exciting to be able to present to you another installment of Do's and Don'ts with Frank and Fred. Tonight, spending the night at your girlfriend's. That's right. When Fred shows up at his date's apartment, he finds an open door and a friendly face. When Frank shows up at his date's apartment, he luckily finds a window she forgot to lock. Fred compliments his date on her apartment. He says, "I have that poster too. It changed my life." Frank picks up her turntable and says, "Can I have this?" After a big spaghetti dinner, Fred says, "Gee, what a great meal. It really sticks to the ribs." Frank says, "What a great meal. It really sticks to the ceiling." After dinner, Fred lights a romantic fire. That's sweet, yes. Frank also lights a romantic fire. Fred says, "Here, I'd like you to wear this." It's very thoughtful. Frank says, "Here, I'd like you to wear this." These darn guys. Fred's date laughingly plays hard to get. Frank's date also plays hard to get. Okay. In bed, Fred is gentle and considerate of his partner's needs. Frank wears his Walkman the whole time. Afterwards, Fred hugs his partner and whispers, "I love you." Frank yells, "I won! I won!" Dating do's and don'ts. When Fred's date wakes up the next morning, she finds a marriage proposal and a wedding ring on the bureau. When Frank's date wakes up, she finds an empty tube of Nair and her eyebrows are missing. Yes, dating do's and don'ts with Frank and Fred. What are we going to do? We're going to pause. We'll be right back with Mr. Bud Greenspan. So much. Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen. What a show it is we have for you tonight. Every once in a while, we like to offer etiquette tips using these two guys right here as examples. We call the series Do's and Don'ts with Frank and Fred. And tonight... we examine how to behave and how not to behave on your wedding day. All right? Here we go. Fred and his fiancée are very careful about their guest list. They invite only close friends and relatives. There they are. It's cute, isn't it? While Frank posts a 3x5 card at the laundromat. The night before the wedding, Fred and his friends get together and watch dirty movies. Oh. Frank and his friends and his fiancée's sister get together and make dirty movies. See, that would be a wedding don't right there. Fred's father says, "You know, son, I've waited a lifetime for this day." Frank's father says, "I'd love to attend your wedding, but I've only seen this Jefferson's once." Sure he do. As his bride marches down the aisle, oh, look at there, Fred's heart swells with pride. That's wonderful, isn't it? Frank begins screaming, "Beam me up, Scotty." Okay. Before they take their vows, Fred reads a passage from The Prophet by Gibran. Oh, I like lingering on these. Frank recites the only poem he's ever memorized, which begins, "There once was a girl from Nantucket." At the reception, Fred accepts his wedding gifts graciously. Frank has erected a giant tally board behind the stage. This Fred is such a weasel, isn't he? Fred asks his new mother-in-law to dance. Frank asks his new mother-in-law to leave. Fred takes a knife and cuts his bride a piece of cake. Yeah, let's not get ahead, okay, kids? Frank takes a knife and rustles up a few more wedding gifts. Wedding do's and don'ts. After the wedding, Fred's friends, oh, this is quite a gag, tie tin cans and bottles to their car. Frank's friends tie the minister to their car. Oh. The next morning, when the excitement is worn off, Fred says, "In my heart, I know we did the right thing." Oh, that's nice. The next morning, when the drugs wear off, Frank screams, "Who are you? We're what?" Wedding do's and don'ts with Frank and Fred. Boy, that sort of brought a tear to my eye. You all right? Well, all hell is broken loose here, ladies and gentlemen. You all right? Okay? Okay. Thank you so much. Welcome back to the program. Later in this half hour, we will have sports producer Bud Greenspan with us, and also the Bird Lady of Queens, Arlene Thomas. Right now, it's time for another installment of Do's and Don'ts with our old friends, yes, Frank and Fred. As you may recall from our last installment, we showed you how to behave and how not to behave on your wedding day, which brings us to tonight's installment, yes, honeymoon do's and don'ts. Number one, for their honeymoon, Fred, there's Fred on the left, and his bride look for the most exotic romantic country on earth. There they are poring over endless travel folders. Frank, on the other hand, looks for a country that has not yet signed an extradition treaty with the United States. But Frank is looking for the... All right. At the airport, Fred and his bride cheerfully comply with the security precautions. I've never seen a more cheerful man in my life. When Frank walks through the metal detector and the alarm doesn't go off, he screams, "That's why I love them new plastic bullets." At the hotel... Here we are at the hotel. Fred tips the bellboy 50 cents to carry the suitcases to the room. There he is. Frank gives the bellboy $50 to carry someone else's suitcases to the room. Frank on the left there. Oh, hey, this is exciting. Fred carries his bride across the threshold. Frank throws a ball into the room and yells, "Fetch." Ugly, awful, awful thing to say. For Fred, his honeymoon night is the most exciting, satisfying sexual experience of his life. And there he is, excited and satisfied. Same for Frank. Honeymoon do's and don'ts. Fred lets his friends back home know he's all right by sending them postcards on a regular basis. Frank lets his friends back home know he's all right by causing international incidents regularly. Fred enjoys bartering with the local street merchants. Fred bartering with it. And, of course, so does Frank. Bartering with the local street merchants there. Fred and his bride want to bring a little piece of their honeymoon home with them. So, what a nice little souvenir. So does Frank, who, by the way, has never seen Midnight Express. Get ready with the music, Paul. Fred and his bride return home with a new appreciation for other cultures as well as for each other. No, not yet, not yet. One card too soon, that's all right. Here we go. At the last moment, Frank decided to stay for another 10 to 15 years. Honeymoon do's and don'ts with Frank and Fred. We'll pause now. We'll be right back with the Bird Lady of Queens, Arlene Thomas. Now, you know, our researchers tell us that not all of our viewers work as messengers. Yes, some of them work in actual office buildings. And so we present a few etiquette tips tonight on how to behave and how not to behave in an office situation. Once again, using these two guys as our models, a segment we like to call Do's and Don'ts with Frank and Fred. Do's and Don'ts with Frank and Fred. There they are, office do's and don'ts. Fred has accepted a job with Barnett Industries because they offered him a challenging position with plenty of room for advancement. Frank has accepted a job with Barnett Industries because it's next to Blimpies. Do's and don'ts with Frank and Fred. Now, Fred tries to make his new office as comfortable as possible. He brings in a picture of his wife. Yeah. Likewise, Frank wants to make his office as comfortable as possible and also brings in a picture of Fred's wife. Ugliest. Fred gets a bonus after just 4 months in the company. Frank gets a bonus after just 4 minutes in the company locker room. Frank breaking into the locker room. Now, sometimes Fred has to work late, even though he hates to leave his wife all alone all night. And Frank also hates to leave her all alone at night. During the weekly meetings, Fred is always thoughtful and attentive. See, there's Fred being thoughtful and attentive. Frank suddenly interrupts the meeting with his impression of Denny Terrio and motion. Blimpies. Fred doesn't expect his secretary to bring him coffee just because she's a woman. Frank doesn't expect his secretary to bring him coffee just because she's a woman. He expects her to bring him coffee because he was born here and she wasn't. Makes me so angry, I'll write an editorial. Fred only takes a day off if it's really important, like if he has to bury his grandmother. Yes, and you guessed it, Frank doesn't take the day off to bury his grandmother. Oh, I know, it's just getting worse by the minute, isn't it? Fred knows how important it is to look his best, and he always dresses Natalie. Frank, of course, also dresses Natalie Barnett, the owner's daughter. I think we all saw that joke coming up 6th Avenue, didn't we? I know I did. Well, a year after 1 year, Fred gets a big promotion because his boss loves hard work and dedication. Frank gets a big promotion because his boss loves a stock boy named Raoul. Just the worst. Do's and don'ts with Frank and Fred. So disgusted. We'll be right back with Carol Leifer. Welcome back to the show. Coming up in the second half hour, filmmaker John Sayles, also comedian Richard Morris. Now, tomorrow night, you want to circle your TV guide for this. Tomorrow night, football great Ben Davidson. Yeah. 60 Minutes with Ben Davidson. So, if you have any questions about the man, his career, where he lives, jot it down, phone it in tomorrow night. We'll have football great Ben Davidson here. Anybody else, do you think? Football great Ben Davidson tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen. 60 Minutes. We wanted to get him before Ted Koppel jumped all over him, and I think we did. We have football great Ben Davidson tomorrow night. And now it's time for another lesson in everyday etiquette using these... Oh, I'm sorry, I've screwed it up already, for heaven's sake. Now it's time for another everyday lesson in etiquette using these two guys as examples, a segment we like to call Do's and Don'ts with Frank and Fred. Tonight... Miss, could I have another drink, please? Tonight's episode, tonight's etiquette lesson, having a baby. Do's and don'ts with Frank and Fred, ladies and gentlemen. Do's and don'ts. When Fred hears that the rabbit has died, he hugs his wife and exclaims, "I'm the luckiest man on earth." That's Fred there and his wife. Frank screams, "Are you happy now? You killed Thumper." Horrible, horrible, horrible joke. We're all just sick about it. Fred finds childbirth classes a rewarding and challenging experience. Frank finds childbirth classes a great place to pick up chicks. Oh, I'm ashamed to be sitting here. Fred puts his hand on his wife's stomach and says, "I think I just felt it move." Frank screams, "Hey, the little creep just kicked me." By the way, if you're just tuning in, tomorrow night, ladies and gentlemen, football great Ben Davidson, 1 hour. Fred says, "Honey, I don't think you should smoke so much while you're pregnant." Fred being very considerate here. Frank says, "Come on, just one more ride and then we'll go home." Fred cheerfully helps his wife shop for baby toys and furniture. And, oh my gosh, what is this? What the hell is...
Ladies and gentlemen, the Bob Hope promotional photo.
Oh my. Ladies and gentlemen, the Bob Hope promotional photo. Evidently, the Bob Hope promotional photo was just across the hall taping a promotional spot, but it had to come over to tell us about Bob's great new special right here on NBC. It's called Bob Hope's Winter Wonderland, and it stars Victoria Principal, Richard Simmons, and the 1983 Rose Bowl Queen. Don't miss it. That's Thursday at 9, 8 Central Time. The Bob Hope promotional photo. Well, I know this card is very busy. You got to get it back across the hall. Thank you very much. Okay. Bob Hope. Fred bought a brand new baby carriage, but he can't seem to find the darn thing. Frank says, "Hey, look what I just found." Implying that he probably stole the carriage there. After months of careful thought, Fred decides to name the baby Arthur. That's cute, isn't it? While watching The Late Show, Frank has a sudden inspiration. The child will be called Rodan. And finally, Fred says, "Hey, I'm a father. Have a cigar." Frank says, "Here, kid, have a cigar." Tomorrow night, football great Ben Davidson. We'll be right back with filmmaker John Sayles. about the horse being blind. Just load the wagon. Speaking of loading the wagon, tomorrow, we're not normally on Friday night, and the reason for that is not clear to me, but tomorrow is one of those deals where we will be on, and on that program tomorrow, we're darn proud about it, ladies and gentlemen. Actress, comedian Madeline Kahn will be joining us. Comedian Pee Wee Herman will sort of be joining us. Singer Chaka Khan will be joining us. We'll also have Steve Khan on guitar. Larry Bud Melman will be here tomorrow night. And taxi races. That's right. 3 people from our studio audience will try and race cabs around 1 block of rush hour traffic right here in New York City. So that'll be tomorrow night on the anomaly we like to call our 90-minute program. Also, Jerry Seinfeld will be joining us, and the gentleman who calls trains down at Penn Station. But right now, it's time, and thank heavens it is, for another installment. Oh, my God. Getting to be a bigger installment. Time for another installment of Everyday Etiquette Tips using these 2 guys right here. You know them, you love them, as examples. A segment we like to call Do's and Don'ts with Frank and Fred. Tonight, the topic is entitled Making the Marriage Work. Let's get right to it, shall we? Do's and Don'ts with Frank and Fred. Fred is kind of the all-American guy. Fred knows how important laughter is in a marriage, and he does his best to keep his wife amused. That's Fred right there. Frank has a foreign lady come in twice a week to tickle his wife. Don't worry about the horse being blind. Just load the wagon. Just load that. Just get it as full as you can. And Fred and his wife shop very carefully. He says, "Gee, I love it too, honey, but we just can't afford it." Frank is also very careful. He says, "Gee, I love it too, honey, but the clerk is watching." Maybe a little more music, Paul. Thank you. Fred keeps the spark in his marriage by occasionally bringing home flowers and gifts. Frank keeps the spark in his marriage by occasionally making a pass at his wife's father. Just load the wagon. Every year on their anniversary, Fred and his wife repeat their wedding vows. Oh, that's very nice. Thank you. Frank also gets married about once a year. Paul? Use that as kind of segue music from now on. Fred says, "I have absolutely no secrets from you, my darling." Frank says, "She's lying, darling. I've never owned an orphanage." It's nice. Kind of a swell there at the crescendo. Fred's wife suggested that they buy a pair of love bats to work out their aggression. Yes, I think we can all see this one coming up 6th Avenue, can't we? Frank's wife suggested the same thing, but he misunderstood. Heard once again from the lady with the whistle, and not a minute too soon. Fred knows his wife occasionally needs time alone. Frank feels the same way. It's just awful. It's just, I don't endorse this. I just do whatever they put in front of me. Fred's marriage, well, this is a happy note, will certainly last forever. Frank's wife hasn't been seen in several weeks. That's Do's and Don'ts with Frank and Fred, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back with Daniel Simmons. Wait a minute. One more. Frank's wife was rescued just in time, and Frank is now serving a 20-year sentence for attempted murder. That's much better, isn't it? We'll be right back with Daniel Simmons. Wait a minute. Try one more here. Frank escaped from his maximum security cell, and now his wife is missing again. We'll be right back with Daniel Simmons. Coming up later in the half hour tonight, we have Charles Panatti, who's written a book about telling you the origin of many, many things, and also comedian David Wood, a very funny young man. Tomorrow on this program, the comedy team of Franken and Davis will be here. We have a champion bubblegum blower and, a tour of Midtown Manhattan. That'll be tomorrow night. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for, I'll read this to you. This is something we used to do, and we're doing it again. One of America's favorite pastimes is going to the beach, but unless you know what you're doing, a day in the sun can turn into a hellish nightmare of social blunders, faux pas, and gaffes. So let's pay a visit to our old friends Frank and Fred as they demonstrate some beach-going do's and don'ts. This is really a long time ago. See, let me re-explain to you. This nasty-looking guy here, he always does kind of the nasty version of everything. That's Frank. And this is Fred. He does kind of the happy, sweet version of everything. So this will be do's and don'ts with Frank and Fred. Let's get right to it. Take that off. Over here. For some reason, these cards are a little thicker than we're accustomed to working with. These are the Eastern European cards, and they're much... I don't know if you can see the width on those babies, but tough. All right. Here's number one. Frank and Fred. Remember, one guy does the sweet, fun stuff. Fred enjoys exploring. There's Fred right there. He enjoys exploring the beach and collecting unusual seashells. That's Fred. Frank collects bikini tops. Fred and his friends play Frisbee at a courteous distance from other beach-goers. Frank and his friends practice their wheelies. I got to get some calipers on these cards. I think we may have a record here. Fred is more than happy to rub baby oil on his date's back. Frank smears his date's back with chum. I know. All right. Fred is forever awestruck by the beauty of the sea. I don't know. Frank blows his nose on his hand. Now, that's comedy. Look, you can't even bend these things. Fred considerately changes the station on his radio to his date's favorite music. Frank changes the oil in his car. Fred is kind of a weenie. That's what happens here. Fred plays it safe and wears a protective sunscreen. All right. Frank wears evil clown makeup. I don't even understand that one. But this is the thickest one of the bunch, so we'll save that. All right. Fred cautiously advises no swimming for an hour after eating. Frank says no eating for an hour after watching fat people play volleyball. Fred goes into the water to enjoy some wholesome frolicking in the surf. Woo! Frank goes into the water because it's closer than the men's room. Okay, that's Frank and Fred going to the beach. We'll be back with Charles Panatti. Coming up in the next half hour, we will have helpful hints from Mary Ellen Pinkham. Also, Julia McGinnis-Johnson, the lovely actress and opera singer, will be here. Tomorrow on this program, Ava Gabor, John Cleese, and Dr. Tuttle. That'll be tomorrow. Dr. Tuttle. Now, why are you eyeing? Who would you rather have been here tonight? John Cleese. All right, well, I'll give him your home addresses, and he'll drop by. But what about Dr. Tuttle? Dr. Tuttle will be here tomorrow with a bat demonstration. These are the actual, these bats, they're kind of like that. All right. It's time now, once again, for another visit with our old friends, Frank and Fred. Ladies and gentlemen. There they are, Frank and Fred. Tonight's topic, by the way... Thank you, Paul. That was nicely done. Tonight's topic, being a good house guest. Do's and don'ts with Frank and Fred. One of them gives you the do's, one of them gives you the don'ts. Tonight's topic, being a good house guest. When spending time at the home of a friend, Fred makes a point of remembering everyone's name. Yeah. Frank calls everyone dude. When asked to say grace before dinner, Fred offers a touching verse from Robert Frost. That's very nice. When asked to say grace before dinner, Frank plays air guitar and mumbles the lyrics to Radar Love. Forgot to turn the card. I was so involved. Thank you very much. I'm going to take a little trip into town. Does anyone need anything? Fred asks thoughtfully. I got to see a guy about some stuff, Frank drools. Don't wait up for me. Do's and don'ts here seem to be catching on. To make sure he is a conscientious guest, Fred copies down a list of family safety rules. That's very nice, I think. Frank copies down a list of family credit card numbers. Fred makes popcorn while the family watches home movies. Frank makes loud noises with his body whenever Grandma appears on the screen. Oh, my. Fred laughs politely at his host's anecdotes. Frank laughs at his host's toupee. Fred helps Junior conduct scientific experiments. Crowd busily making up their own punchline. So does Frank. Fred plays with the kids in the den. I think we can see this one coming up 6th Avenue. Frank plays with the kids on the roof. Awful. Just awful. Fred politely answers the phone with his host's name and address. What a weenie this guy is, isn't he? Look at... Frank answers with, do you want to buy a hunting knife? Maybe not. And finally, Fred wakes up to the sound of chirping birds. Frank wakes up nude on the patio. We'll be right back. Thanks, Paul. Tomorrow night, Richard Belzer will be here, and also Mr. Science, Dr. Richard Brandt, will be here. What's he going to demonstrate tomorrow night, Dr. Brandt? How things swing. Oh, yeah, good. Well, if anybody knows, it's certainly this guy. That'll be tomorrow night. But right now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for a segment we like to call Do's and Don'ts with Frank and Fred. Paul? Yes, there they are. Tonight's topic, ski trip do's and don'ts with Frank and Fred. On the ski lift, Fred quietly reads an article on downhill courtesy. Frank points at the cable and yells, "We're all going to die." Fred finds his ski mask offers great protection from the cold. Frank finds his ski mask offers great protection from the heat. On the slopes, Fred turns by executing a graceful stem Christie. I have no idea what the hell that is. But there he is. It's a what? Skiing term? Stem Christie, is it?
Stem Christie.
Yeah. Do you ski,
Way of
Paul?
making a turn, yeah.
Do you ski?
Yes, I do. Well, I did when I was 18, up until the age of 18.
You really ski?
Yes, up in Canada.
Any sort of proof?
Well, I know what a stem Christie is. I know what a Vadalin is. I know what a snowplow is.
Yeah, but yeah.
I know what a...
Well, I know what a tractor is, so to hell with it.
Oh, no.
Well, bring in a photo. Can you bring in a photo of you?
I'll look for a
skiing?
photo, yeah.
Have your folks send something down from Thunder
Okay,
Bay.
we'll see if we can get something.
All right.
Meantime, stem Christie.
Stem Christie. Fred turns by executing a graceful stem Christie. What's the point? Anyway, Frank turns by slamming into fat people. For some reason, it's difficult to imagine you as a skier, but I'll
See me out there?
Yeah, I'll take your word for it.
Okay.
Fred enhances his skiing fun by collecting lift tickets. Frank enhances his skiing fun by collecting warning signs. Oh, my gosh. Okay, Fred and his girlfriend reenact the love scene from Dr. Zhivago. Frank and his girlfriend reenact the agony of defeat scene from the Wide World of Sports. Fred runs from the sauna right out to the snow the way the Norwegians do. Frank runs from the bar right out to the gutter the way Marines on leave do. All right. One of these guys is a weenie, one is a felon. That's it. See, that's the premise, sure. Yeah, that's how it works. Fred waves to the ski patrol as he glides downhill. There he is, being ever courteous. Frank waves to the ski patrol as he heads toward the border. Maybe not. And finally, Fred writes his... Get ready, Paul. Cover me here. Fred writes his name on a cast. Frank writes his name in the snow. Do's and don'ts with Frank and Fred. We'll be right back with treasure diver Barry Clifford. Tomorrow, Ashford and Simpson will be here. Joe Namath and Lester Lannon. That's right, Society Orchestra leader Lester Lannon. That'll be tomorrow night. Sounded good, Paul, and thank God someone had the presence of mind to order the timbales.
You did that.
Yeah. Normally I order the enchiladas, but you know...
We didn't set him up, you know.
Huh?
We didn't set him up. I know you ordered
No, I had to do that. And you're going to sing another song. What's the name of the other song?
Oh, I don't want to give it away.
No, tell him. Come on, tell him. We don't want people going to sleep. Tell him.
Like a little thing called
No,
Give Me
okay,
Some
don't
Lovin'.
tell him.
A little
You can't
thing.
tell him?
I already told him.
We'll do a little comedy here, and then we get back to the
little
music.
thing called Give Me Some Lovin'.
Oh, good. I really wish you hadn't told him. Here it is. Frank and Fred. Any music? Quick. We're in a hurry. Let's go. That was the same music you did for the gift items.
Yes, it's a kind of a theme tonight. That's the music from the summer special. You may remember.
Yeah, I remember. Oh, do we all remember? I know. We got to go. We haven't done one of these in a long time, and you'll soon see why. Here with a few helpful pointers on etiquette at the ballpark are some do's and don'ts with Frank and Fred. And incidentally, all of them are from the innovative designers at Bell Laboratories. All right. Here we go. Got to get right through this. Fred, he's the good guy, purchases tickets, his tickets only from authorized stadium personnel. That's Fred right there. Frank tries to get in by flashing a phony press pass from Swank magazine. Bell Labs. All of this stuff comes from the Bell Laboratories. During the national anthem, are there instructions with this stuff? During the national anthem, Fred feels a strong surge of patriotism. Frank feels the leg of the person standing next to him. Are these riveted together? No matter what ballpark he's in, Fred thrills to hear the words, play ball. No matter where he is, Frank thrills to the words, Steinbrenner sucks. Yankees are not doing too badly. Fred compliments a vendor on the fine taste of the hot dogs. Frank reminds him that he's working for minimum wage. I'm hurting myself doing this. During the seventh inning stretch, Fred leads a rousing rendition of Take Me Out to the Ball Game. Frank rushes down to the box seat, screaming out the words to Smoke on the Water. Send this one back to the labs, will you? Fred carefully times his visit to the men's room so that he doesn't miss seeing the home team at bat. I think we can all see this one coming. Frank carefully times his visit to the men's room so the security guard won't see him using a jumbo beer cup. How we doing? Oh, boy. I'm breaking some records here. Fred holds onto his ticket stub and a complete scorecard so that later he can relive his memories of the game. Oh, not a bad idea. Frank relies on chemically induced flashbacks. Get ready, Paul. You ready? Ready? And when you play this off, let's use the timbales, all right?
We didn't set them up. Do we have them?
Never mind. Oh, nothing's working. Oh.
God.
Okay.
We're glad you ordered.
Okay.
You really are.
Here we go. This is our last one. Fred goes home with a special souvenir doll of the team's lovable mascot. That's cute. Frank goes home with the lifeless form of the team mascot tied to his fender. All right. We'll be right back. We'll be right back with John Candy and Eugene Levy.